On their wedding night, the man shows his muscular physique to his stuttering new bride. His well-built frame makes her nervous and fearful. To avoid her father's punishment, the inexperienced Maisie trembles as she accepts his advances. "I gave you a chance to leave before, so even if you're unwilling, you'll have to endure it." Though appearing to be the beloved daughter of a duke's family, she was despised by her father for her plain looks and stutter, living a life of constant abuse since childhood. One day her father suddenly arranged her marriage to Riften, a commoner. But this was all part of her father's scheme to push the king's dragon-slaying mission onto him. The price was merely Maisie, his despised and useless daughter. So no matter what the man does, she can only submit. Even if beaten, she must endure it, for if she ruins this, what awaits isn't just physical punishment. After their wedding night, when Maisie drowsily opens her eyes, Riften had already left to slay the dragon, and today marks the first time he's returned in 3 years. Initially, her father only meant to send him to his death. Unexpectedly, he not only defeated the dragon and became a hero, but also became a sword master. Rumors say even the princess is pursuing him now, and he's returned to divorce her. The Duke severely berates Maisie, expressing disgust at her stutter, saying she couldn't even keep a man. Maisie musters courage to talk back while trembling, only to receive another beating. The Duke issues an ultimatum. He absolutely won't allow her to be divorced by a knight of common birth. If she can't handle even this small matter and brings shame to the family, she should know what consequences await her. "I truly am useless." Maisie. Her husband survived death while his wife trembles in fear. Riften darkly watches his little wife as she stutteringly welcomes him home. Her trembling appearance makes the man somewhat angry. He suddenly grabs her wrist, thinking Maisie won't even pretend to welcome him. He turns away in frustration, thinking he's leaving. Maisie grabs his clothes but gets more nervous and stutters worse, looking at his sweet, soft little wife. Riften finally can't hold back. He pins her down, covering her in gentle kisses. Just as he's about to do something naughty, he gets interrupted by his subordinate. Hearing he must leave immediately, Maisie thinks he's leaving again. Afraid of being beaten to death by her father, she's about to stop him. But then here's Riften ordering the maid to pack her luggage. Seeing her confused look, Riften's face darkens. "You plan to let me go alone?" Without waiting for an answer, he grabs Maisie's wrist and heads out. In the carriage, looking at the tall and mighty man before her, worried that leaving without permission would anger her father, but he simply says, "You are my wife." She's heard the king has been persuading him to marry Princess Agnes. Princess Agnes is a legendary beauty and a renowned magician. While Riften is hailed as a hero in the dragon-slaying war, Princess Agnes should be his destined one, not useless Maisie. Suddenly remembering their previous intimate moments, her face turns red, wondering how he can be so unabashed, suddenly distracted by the scenery outside, like an excited little fox. Hearing the man's light cough, she comes back to her senses, dejectedly hanging her head. Is being with me that uncomfortable? Not at all. Or do you want to go back? Maisie knows she must say something. If she really goes back, her father will surely kill her. She nervously grips her dress. It's just my first time in a carriage for so long. The man sighs. "We don't know each other well, but I plan to spend my life with you. Yet you tremble in fear just being near me." Maisie is shocked. A lifetime? The man thinks she didn't take their marriage vows seriously. Maisie frantically denies this. But for the past 3 years, she stayed in Croy City instead of his territory. This greatly displeases Riften, especially since he sent subordinates several times to fetch Maisie, but she never came. But Maisie knows nothing of this. Yet the man assumes the noble duke's daughter looks down on him. While they're at an impasse, the carriage suddenly shakes violently. It turns out they're being pursued by ogres. Leaving Maisie in the carriage with a barrier, Riften goes to fight the monsters. A monster suddenly approaches the carriage, frightening Maisie to the ground. She accidentally falls out of the carriage. Afraid of causing trouble, Maisie struggles to crawl back to the carriage. But suddenly a monster appears before her, just as she's about to be crushed under its feet. She resignedly closes her eyes. Riften appears before her, driving back the monster with 2 swift strikes. After the close call, Maisie faints rather ingloriously. In her dreams are only people's insults. The cold floor, only Little Black accompanies her. Maisie suddenly wakes up to see Riften's worried gaze. Because she fainted, they had to find nearby lodging, delaying their journey. Riften sighs helplessly, saying she was fine seeing monsters, but fainted upon seeing him. Really troublesome. Maisie is very worried, afraid of being considered a burden. But the man is full of concern and plans to call a doctor. Suddenly noticing her bare arms, she shrinks into the blanket, trembling frantically. Who undressed me? Before finishing her sentence, Riften thinks she's unwell and turns to find a doctor. Maisie burrows into the blanket. I just have no clothes on. Hearing this, the man finally relaxes. Tells her not to hide since he's already seen everything while changing her clothes, and accidentally tore her undergarments. Speaking of this, the mighty warrior's cheeks turn red. You couldn't breathe then? I just pulled a bit. Besides, it's just changing clothes. They consummated their marriage 3 years ago. Riften sighs. You noble ladies always fainting. Maisie feels very remorseful hearing this, thinking he's angry, possibly regretting bringing her along because she's unwanted. Maisie. At this moment, a bowl of steaming soup and a barley bread are suddenly pushed before her. The man awkwardly speaks words of care, making Maisie feel suddenly warm inside. Why did you bring me along? Hearing her words, the man grits his teeth. What do you mean? She believes Riften was forced to marry her. If he wants a divorce, better now. At least if abandoned now, she can still go back. The man's face becomes frightening. You're talking about divorce? He loses control and grabs Maisie's shoulders, thinking she fell for someone else while he was risking his life outside. She tremblingly denies this, says she heard rumors about him marrying the princess. Tears fall like pearls. Riften suddenly embraces her. You're really going to be the death of me. Gently kisses away the tears on her eyes, murmurs into her neck. I don't know where you heard that, but I already refused. In Riften's view, marriage is sacred, not to be betrayed. Despite this, Maisie still feels insecure. Could the rumors just be your excuse? Do you actually want a divorce? She frantically shakes her head, afraid he'll misunderstand. Riften lightly touches her forehead. Good if that's not the case. With beauty in his arms, Riften can't remain calm, especially after holding back for so long. Finding her soft lips, he kisses her. The mighty warrior pins his little wife down, seeking intimacy. Just looking at her makes the man shiver, nearly losing control. Riften kisses Maisie's palm. Maisie tightly embraces his neck. Sunlight streams into the room, the mess on the floor full of intimacy. Even now, Maisie still feels a bit panicked. Thinking of last night makes her face heat up. He gently strokes her hair. When Riften left her 3 years ago, it took great determination. Maisie never dared imagine he would find leaving her so difficult. The man suddenly opens his eyes, startling her to tremble. Quickly withdrawing her fingers with a red face, Riften holds her tightly in his arms, nuzzling gently. I was going crazy waiting for you to wake up. Feeling his kisses landing on her body. Just being with his little wife makes him lose control. Holding her delicate fingers, he very much wants another round. But at this moment, knocking comes from outside. Commander, please get up. The rest will have to wait until we reach the territory. The man grits his teeth in frustration, turning back to see Maisie trembling frantically under the blanket again. Riften feels somewhat headached. I'm quick-tempered if you don't speak up. How would I know what's wrong? Maisie emerges, cheeks flushed red. They all know what we did. The man bursts out laughing, looking at the girl's shy, innocent appearance, gently kissing her forehead. My innocent, noble lady, don't be shy. We're husband and wife. This is perfectly natural. The man grits his teeth as he changes. Riften thoughtfully prepared new dresses for her. Maisie looks at herself in the mirror. Such beautiful clothes. When Riften barges in, he sees the beauty before him, steps forward to help her dress, and comforts Maisie, apologizing for her hardship. The clothes were bought in haste, somewhat shabby. Riften doesn't know. These are already the most magnificent clothes Maisie has worn. After all, she used to wear clothes made from leftover scraps from her noble sister. She's not the noble lady Riften imagines. She fears he'll be disappointed when he finds out. Following him through the noisy crowd, she feels his subordinates' dislike of her. Although Riften keeps protecting her, Maisie still feels dejected, but she can understand. After all, they're all forced to tolerate her because of her father Riften sees all this. These bastards are truly detestable, but seeing the man even angrier than herself, Maisie can't help but smile, feeling warmth in her heart. The man sees her smile, suddenly leans close to her. "This is the first time you've smiled at me." Due to inconvenient lodging during travel, they go directly to a small cabin. Riften wants to find another room for Maisie, but as he turns, she tugs his clothes. "They'll hate me more if we do that." She blinks her big eyes. I don't want to be alone." A moment of dead silence. The subordinates tactfully withdraw. Riften coughs. "Then let's go." Maisie is devastated seeing people coming and going in the house. This wasn't what she expected. Seeing the man thoughtfully laying out bedding and preparing steaming hot potatoes for her, she suddenly feels this moment is better than any feast she had in Croix. City, Maisie feels nervous feeling the man's warm breath on her neck. Everyone is here." The man plants a kiss on her. "No one cares. Don't move. It's warmer this way." The subordinates can only pretend to be dead. "Commander, really?" The white-haired junior carries a lamp, complaining indignantly, "Why make it so hard for the lady? At least consider her feelings." The suddenly appearing Ruth makes Riften turn into a bristling cat. Not wanting him near his little wife, Ruth frantically complains even stray dogs aren't as possessive as him, and gives Maisie a small gift of a firestone with warming magic. Maisie is grateful for his kindness. Holding the firestone, she feels unprecedented warmth. The next few days were spent traveling, but Maisie feels Riften growing distant. He's made excuses to sleep separately for several nights. This makes her heart feel unsettled, thinking he's grown tired of her. The man orders a rest at their current location. Taking advantage of their time alone, Maisie decides to apologize. I'm sorry for annoying you." Riften freezes, not understanding. "You sleep alone every night? Are you tired of me?" The man feels very dejected that she would think this way, suddenly grabbing Maisie's wrist, taking large strides deeper into the forest, pinning her against a tree, step by step closing in. "Just being near you makes me unable to control myself." Maisie's cheeks flush red as she widens her eyes. He explains, sleeping separately was just to control his beast-like desires to take her anytime, anywhere. Because they need to travel, Maisie shares a horse with him. The sudden appearance of monsters doesn't surprise anyone anymore. The juniors rush into battle without hesitation. After calming Maisie, Riften also joins the battlefield. One strike, one kill, clean and efficient. After finishing, everyone continues speeding towards the territory. Finally, at sunset, they see a peaceful and prosperous territory full of hope. Maisie, "That's my territory, Anatole." Riften stands proud in the sunlight. He explains the details of the territory to Maisie, though it looks somewhat desolate, not as magnificent as Croix City. But Maisie doesn't think so. She finds it grand and imposing. Riften spent many years building this wall, using much of his wealth so normal monsters cannot approach Ruth, adds snarkily from the side. Hard to say after being away so long. The common people line the streets to welcome their young dragon-slaying hero and the Red Knights. They are Anatole's protectors, worthy of the highest welcome ceremony and everyone's heartfelt cheers. This moment makes Maisie's heart race involuntarily, completely different from Croix City, where people feared her father. Two provocatively dressed ladies catch Maisie's attention, making her dizzy. Riften refuses to attend the welcome party, telling them to enjoy themselves. He has more important things to do now, taking Maisie back to the castle, formally introducing her status. When he enters the desolate room, the man becomes angry. He had sent word ahead to decorate the castle beautifully. Now it seems unsatisfactory. The tense atmosphere makes Maisie struggle to breathe, unconsciously reminded of her father's abuse. Grabbing the man's clothes, I want to rest." Seeing the constantly trembling Maisie, Riften gently picks her up. "Don't be afraid, I'm not angry with you." Ignoring her struggles, carries her to their room before everyone. The room is somewhat to his satisfaction. These new high-grade furnishings are incomparably better than her room in Croix City, but Riften only feels frustrated, afraid Maisie will find it shabby, just wanting to give her the best. He changes tone. "Damn, managing the castle was supposed to be your job. If you had come earlier, we wouldn't be so rushed." At these words, Maisie jolts. The blaming tone reminds her of her father again, tightly closing her eyes, waiting for punishment, but the expected pain doesn't come. Riften crouches before her, saying, "From now on, the castle management is hers. No matter how much money it takes, as long as she likes it." The man's gaze is deep and firm. "Are you willing?" Gently lifting her chin, "This will be your home from now on." Maisie's eyes tremble, a strange feeling passing through her heart. Will try my best." Maisie believes Riften thinks she's a noble lady educated in aristocracy, which is why he unhesitatingly hands the castle to her. But she's never had money, never commanded servants. She fears Riften discovering the real her, fears him learning his wife of 3 years' hard work is a useless person who can do nothing. She can only keep cheering herself on in her heart, looking up to see the man shirtless, his eyes carrying a seductive look straight at her. "Come bathe together, Maisie." She curls up in the water, thinking about the man's matter-of-fact statement that spouses should bathe together. Riften stares at her, his eyes naked with aggression, suddenly caressing Maisie's smooth cheek, pulling her into his embrace, playing with her long hair, "Let me wash it for you," planting a string of dense kisses on her white back, then whispering in her ear, making Maisie unconsciously relax. Tilting her head, she falls asleep. The man looks at her somewhat helplessly. Really fell asleep. When Maisie hazily opens her eyes, it's already bright daylight. Ain is the personal maid Riften arranged for her. From her, she learns Riften went to the training ground early, feeling her gentle touch, so different from the servants who used to pull out chunks of hair when combing Ain makes her look like a princess. She very much wants Riften to see. Where's the train? Training ground? Ain doesn't immediately respond, cautiously asking if Maisie is unwell somewhere. Her face feels hot. She turns and runs away. Afraid of being laughed at, she instinctively wants to hide. Butler, Selik, comes to greet her. Maisie tries hard to suppress herself, not wanting them to notice her stutter and look down on her. Selik is a kind old man, offering to show Maisie around the castle, explaining Anatol's history, how monsters frequently appeared in this area. Few residents lived here. It had been unmanaged for a long time. Until 10 years ago, when Riften became the lord here, started building the walls, and so on. The butler's long explanation carries a proud expression, making Maisie feel Riften truly endured many hardships. Regarding the castle's desolation, Selik feels ashamed. In the following days, Maisie witnesses the castle's gloomy banquet hall. Desolate courtyard, cold kitchen, finally fully understanding this castle's dilapidation. While the mighty lord, frustrated from desire, fiercely drills the soldiers, making them suffer greatly. However, all this ends the moment he sees Maisie. Showing a gentleness the others have never seen, the juniors witness their different lord, feeling deeply disturbed. Facing such a commander, they'd rather face monsters. Riften's eyes can't help stealing glances, but sees Maisie turning to leave. Takes large strides towards her, grabbing her wrist. "Why leave without a word to me?" With a wave, he lets the soldiers rest, taking Maisie to tour the castle himself. She somewhat embarrassedly apologizes to the man. "Thank you for last night." Mentioning this, Riften feels exhausted, having beauty in arms but unable to touch, simply a human nightmare. Riften takes Maisie up the wall, overlooking his territory. Afraid she'll be bored, he actively makes conversation. But just this small gesture makes Maisie mistakenly think Riften is a playboy. After all, people gossip about his handsomeness behind his back. His attentiveness makes Maisie's heart race even more, also making her more insecure. Following Riften's instructions, Ain brings Maisie ginger tea and apologizes for the morning's incident. Facing the sweet, soft, and gentle beautiful lady, Ain is deeply moved. After all, before this she faced only rough men daily. Her enthusiasm gives Maisie a strange sense of familiarity. "Because there's a banquet tonight," Ain suggests, giving Maisie another makeover. Determined to make her a beauty who conquers the world, magnificent dress and brilliant jewels all clash with this castle, somehow making her feel uneasy, even suspecting they belong to his former lover. Maisie cheers herself on internally, stepping into this noisy world. Riften solemnly introduces his wife to his subordinates, his gaze carrying threats, telling them to treat the lady with utmost respect. The subordinate's cheers make Maisie uncomfortable. Seeing her unease, the man begins feeding her mode. The subordinates quickly become friendly, all begging Riften to tell the dragon-slaying story. Everyone admires him greatly. This harmonious and lively atmosphere makes Maisie daze out. The forced banquets she attended in Croa City were all suffocating. This scene would be considered improper in her father's eyes, but Maisie feels the room full of vitality. Being in such an environment unconsciously makes her happy too. The man's warm fingers brush across her skin, caressing her necklace, looking at her with dark, unclear eyes. Such simple touches in the noisy crowd make her heart race. Riften's fingers keep moving. One hand pulls her into his embrace. Maisie's cheeks flush red, tremblingly calling his name, making the man's taut string finally snap, pulling Maisie to leave early. Once outside, he pins her against the wall corner and kisses her, punishing her for looking at other men, speaking as he blocks Maisie's soft lips again, his large hands roaming her body, making her tremble. Picking her up in one motion, taking large strides towards the bedroom, Riften realizes for the first time the castle has so many stairs. Pressing her onto the bed, his eyes full of desire, taking off his shirt, revealing sexy abs. A night of entanglement, displaying the man's unspoken love. He loves everything about Maisie. Even her once despised long hair is especially precious in Riften's eyes because of the man's one statement of liking it. When Aine does her hair, she chooses to let it fall over her shoulders. Maisie works hard to become a worthy Mrs. Capus, reading account books, familiarizing herself with city affairs, while Riften stays busy patrolling the territory, leaving early, returning late daily. Then comes her first task as the Lord's wife, receiving merchants, beginning to discuss details of renovating the castle. When it comes to professional knowledge, Merchant Sona talks endlessly. Various types, novel styles, giving Maisie a huge headache. After sending Sona away, the tailor Riften found for Maisie arrives. After a full day, Maisie is swaying with exhaustion. Making the castle magnificent will cost a lot. Maisie isn't sure if she can really freely use such a large sum of money. Moreover, she doesn't know how to calculate money units. While deeply pondering, she meets the late returning Riften. He takes out wildflowers hidden in his chest, shyly presenting them to her, bringing Maisie great joy. The rare clear weather in rainy season makes Maisie cheerful. The continuous rain has kept Riften busy. They haven't slept together since the banquet. Thinking of this, Maisie's cheeks turn red. She's been buried in the study lately. How to manage the castle leaves her clueless, plus having to maintain dignity before servants is very tiring. But thinking she can have dinner with Riften today, her heart instantly blooms. However, she hears arguing outside the dining room, facing Riften's delay in attending the capital's celebration, subordinates find it inappropriate. This is blatant disregard for His Majesty will cause unnecessary trouble. Riften is irritated. This is his first time home in 3 years, but His Majesty trying every way to summon Riften to the capital is well known. Plus, Princess Agnes's matter, Riften doesn't want to be bound by royalty, but repeatedly snubbing. His Majesty will surely make him feel disgraced, and he always holds grudges. Should have gone straight to the capital instead of going to the Duke's territory. Hearing the reason for everyone's argument, Maisie's mood drops, makes excuse of feeling unwell and leaves. Back in her room, she keeps thinking about Riften leaving in 3 days, to the point she doesn't notice the man's arrival. You left at dawn. Dawn again today? Must be tired. At least the weather cleared up. Riften murmurs lowly, I rather wish the rainy season would last longer. Watching the man handle his long sword, Maisie worries, afraid he'll leave without a word like their wedding night. Feeling her gaze, the man asks puzzled, Do you have something to say? Wanting to ask when he's going to the capital, but instead asks, You really treasure your sword? Riften developed the habit since age 14, never letting others touch his sword. He got it at his first sword tournament. It's a first-class famous sword. Hearing him mention the sword tournament, her eyes shine with admiration. Her father would occasionally take her sister, but for her, it was something that only existed in novels. At sword tournaments, brave knights would kiss beautiful noble ladies. Thinking of this, she asks, Has Riften ever kissed anyone? These words make the man freeze, while Maisie's face explodes red, having accidentally spoken aloud. Nervously explains, she read in books that knights receive princesses' kisses after victory. In Maisie's view, noble ladies' kisses are the highest honor for knights, but Riften can't understand. After all, he's of lowly mercenary birth, doesn't understand what honor there is in kissing women who wrinkle their noses at seeing him. Maisie falls silent. Riften suddenly stands up, lightly touches her forehead. "Are you unwell? You look pale." Maisie's face flushes red. No." The man notices the model on the table. "What's this? Models for decorative sculptures in the banquet hall." The man lifts her long hair. "No, I want to do it for you. Hold the most magnificent banquet." Riften fears not giving Maisie enough, making her feel wronged, promises to bring her a carriage of gifts from the capital. Mentioning this topic, Maisie's mood drops, not wanting to be left alone. The man buries his face in her lap like spoiled child. Really don't want to leave. Years of warfare have tired him, just wants to rest few months. Better few years. Maisie's eyes fill with heartache. Raises her hand, gently pats his head. "Cheer up." Riften's expression freezes. The desire he barely suppressed crashes down like waterfall. Grabbing her calf, eyes full of desire, Maisie's cheeks are flushed. Meanwhile, the subordinates find amusement imitating Riften's angry expression. Almost lifelike, though their respect for him hasn't diminished at all. The blonde sincerely feels sometimes he doesn't even seem human. Ruth has been by his side longest. He recalls their first meeting when Riften was only 16 back then. He was even more reckless and bold than now, living like there was no tomorrow. With departure approaching, the man publicly kisses his little wife reluctantly. A simple, "Wait for your return," makes Riften's heart soft. Following the knight's departure, the empty territory seems more desolate. Selik observes Riften's changes. This is the first time he's heard the Lord say he'll return quickly, and it's all because of Maisie. Anatol was once abandoned. Residents only settled here after Riften came. He rebuilt the territory, fought monsters, used his private wealth to build walls, all to protect residents' safety. But every departure was silent. Only since Maisie arrived has Riften truly considered this place home. Feeling their sincerity, insecurity once again secretly creeps into Maisie's heart. If they discover she's useless and can do nothing, will Riften and these people full of enthusiasm for him turn cold like her father? After Riften's departure, long-term tension makes Maisie fall ill. The gentle care makes Maisie's heart sour. She can't help wanting to indulge in this warmth. The man rushes to work tirelessly to return home early, choosing less populated streets. Encountering numerous monsters along the way is inevitable. Maisie, growing up under pressure and disdain, never experiencing family love's happiness to avoid disappointing Riften. She decides to change, starting with managing the castle well, but ideals are full while reality is harsh. Ruth looks at the quotation with headache. According to the lady's calculations, Lord Riften will soon go bankrupt. Several days ago, Maisie, sighing over incomprehensible bills in the library, was caught by magician Ruth hiding there. Teaching. Looking closer was shocking. "How much money have you spent these days?" Mentioning this, Maisie feels guilty. Riften said, Don't worry about money. There still needs to be a limit." Ruth collapses, then begins private tutoring. He lightly taps the table. If really can't handle it, can ask Selik or others for help. Maisie jolts, "Absolutely not. And Ruth, you said you'd help me." He feels speechless. How did he get so wrapped around this couple's fingers? Mentioning Riften, Maisie becomes talkative, endlessly praising him. Ruth is forced to eat a large bowl of dog food. Wrong, all wrong. He takes a deep breath. Let's stop here today. Look anymore, and he might die of anger. Ruth sees the landscape plan for the courtyard in the plans. That would mean removing this dead oak tree. But Anatol people believe spirits dwell in trees, so even when dead, they never easily cut them down, especially oak trees. Seeing Maisie's confused look, Ruth tells her the legend of Vigolo. God gave him holy sword, ending ancient dark war, legend says. After completing his mission, he flew to sky on white dragon. For Anatol people, Vigolo's legend has special meaning, because legend says where Vigolo rode dragon away was hillside. Outside Anatol people here grew up hearing Vigolo's legend and story of hero. Vigolo falling in love with oak spirit is also famous, so people here believe spirits still waiting for Vigolo if remove oak tree. Probably will be hated, though privately, Maisie falls silent, caught in dilemma. Ruth peeks at her, then sighs softly. I'll try to see if I can save it. After a period of teaching, Maisie barely passes standard. Ruth also explains different currencies' different values. Among them, world's most valuable is Rowan currency, made from mountain copper, only 600 pieces in whole continent, 160 in Lord Riften's hands, found in Valley Monster Cave. 6 years ago, he searched for treasures like Possessed. Originally had 200 pieces, later used 40 pieces building walls, fixing village roads, renovating castle. Mentioning this, Ruth feels heartache. Only needed 20 pieces was enough. Just because he was rushing to complete work, paid workers double price. Maisie is startled by Ruth. After long interaction, finds this person becomes quite scary when talking about money. Crystal fountains, marble floors, all cancelled. So under Ruth's constant reminders, Maisie finds the jeweler to reduce orders. Meanwhile, everyone in Castle is full of enthusiasm and expectation, though full house customization suggestion was passed by Ruth. Essential wall lamps and fireplaces remain unchanged. Maisie, commanding servants, shows some momentum, but she still feels uneasy inside, constantly checking account books, avoiding mistakes, though uncertain if Riften will be happy seeing Castle changes. But since Ruth says it's fine, must be fine thinking this, Maisie sweeps away gloom, prepares to check items Castle needs for winter. Recording one by one, striving to grow into qualified leader. But in private, even wind blowing past makes her miss Riften unbearably, also breeds equal unease. He is continent-saving hero. Will receive many noble ladies' favor at banquets. Would someone so excellent regret marriage with her? Two apprentice knights interrupt Maisie's thoughts. Yuri and Garu from banquet learning. Maisie is alone, willingly act as escorts guards. This feels completely different from seeing Oslin and others' frightened reaction. Yuri is simply over-enthusiastic, more openly showing admiration for Riften, making Maisie want to learn more too, listening to Yuri endlessly talk about Riften. He successively defeated 2 knights revered as Rosen Vigolo's martial arts is his idol. He was already excellent knight before slaying dragon. When Maisie is asked if seen Riften's swing sword, she can't help bragging. Of course I've seen, though I fainted still counts as seeing. She doesn't want others saying she doesn't know her husband brain heated, loudly says, I personally saw Riften kill castle-sized god giant. Under 2 juniors' admiring gazes, blood rushes to head, speaking wildly, vividly telling stories to 2 inexperienced youngsters. Passionate, expression firm. If not actually there, would easily be fooled. Just as getting excited, weak voice comes, making Maisie whole body stiffen. Turning head finds Ruth under oak tree not far away, looking at her with meaningful gaze, making Maisie's little heart skip chaotically. Originally just wanted to brag bit, now overdid it. Hearing Ruth's teasing words, Maisie just wants to disappear, but gets pulled by 2 to continue. She frowns somewhat embarrassedly. Ruth helps her escape out of humanity, also hands her letter. Tells Maisie, Riften will arrive in 10 days at most. She thanks him, then hurriedly prepares to flee this place of right and wrong. Ruth nods understanding. I know you're busy. One sentence strikes Maisie's heart. Learning news of beloved feels especially warm. Even sharp-tongued Ruth looks more pleasing. However, seeing him again in library still can't help frowning. Ruth screening Maisie's organized order form he really doesn't understand. Preparing lamp oil and candles is fine. What about all these soaps and essential oils? Hearing it's SB prepared for nights, that bunch would die from bit of floral scent. Looking at book list, Ruth clipped to order form, Maisie firmly refuses this self-serving behavior. Your own wants can't use budget to buy. Ruth starts persuading. Knowledge is priceless. Everyone has right to borrow from library. Maisie's mouth twitches, recalling his endless nagging. Free borrowing? This is simply deceiving me. Even she as a mistress needs his approval to come here. Ruth again uses improving magic as excuse, seen through by Maisie. These you wrote aren't even magic books. Ruth really didn't expect she would know. Seeing persuasion unsuccessful, quickly says, Doesn't Madam hope future children won't just be muscleheads? At these words, Maisie's body stiffens, slowly turns, face flushed red. Ruth gains a group of fangirls while treating the oak tree, unexpectedly discovers Maisie's affinity for magic. In the castle, everyone is preparing for the cold winter, but an unexpected incident occurs. A self-proclaimed nobleman from Lebanon arrives with 30 fully armed knights. Taking advantage of the lord's absence, he comes to strengthen admiration. Making his intentions suspicious, Maisie tightens the reins. Deeply worried, the man on horseback refuses to show his identity card, yet forces everyone to open the gates, as the only master present in the castle. Maisie must take responsibility for dealing with the situation. Looking at the crowd below, Maisie can't stop trembling. The man pressures her step by step, claims he is Lord Robert from Western Lebanon, coming specially to make friends. Maisie encourages herself internally, refuses his unreasonable demands based on the rule that without showing an identity card, entry is forbidden, but is mocked by the man for her stuttering speech, making Maisie flush red with shame and anger, yet she still stands firm. Showing no intention of giving up until they enter, the hot-tempered O'Brien is provoked, falling right into the man's trap. The next second they launch an attack on the castle gates. The barrier Ruth sets up in emergency is easily broken through by them. This shows they came prepared. Knowing this would be a fierce battle, Ruth tells Maisie to hide herself. Chaos erupts as everyone engages in combat. Robert smirks with a vicious smile, raises his sword, but freezes upon seeing knights approaching from afar, and the Red Knight order. Riften appears with a dark expression. His presence overwhelming, Maisie collapses on the ground, her body trembling uncontrollably, unable to move. Ruth quickly pulls her up, hands her to the gate guards. Watching them break through the gates, Maisie's face shows vacantly. Villagers scatter to hide, their peaceful lives disrupted. Maisie feels she should do something, rather than abandon these people to flee, but Ruth refuses. "You should hide quickly, there's nothing you can do now." Maisie helplessly releases her grip on his clothes, stumbles as the young soldier pulls her, but then hears the villagers' cheers, sees her long-missed beloved, feeling unprecedented security, seeing their lord. Everyone has tears in their eyes. Riften's presence is overwhelming, his glance makes them shiver. "So we had guests while I was away?" The Knight Order surrounds them heavily. "Do you know what to call guests who come without the host's invitation?" Wuslin and Heberon play along, calling them uninvited guest, "Captain. I think bandits would be more accurate." Riften's expression becomes bloodthirsty. "Coming to my territory to cause trouble. Quite courageous. How about we engrave on your tombstone for foolish courage that defied death?" Seeing his life in danger, he explains his identity and intentions, pushes the blame onto the soldiers protecting Anatole's territory, says it was just a small friction because they wouldn't let him enter. Riften's eyes shift slightly. What he sees are broken walls, injured soldiers. Chaos everywhere. He lets out a cold laugh, steps closer to Robert. "You call this small friction?" He swiftly draws his sword and holds it to the man's throat. "This is nothing short of a declaration of war. In return, I'll take your head, lead an army to break my gates, destroy everything in sight." Hearing his words, Robert shows fear. Until now, he hasn't realized his mistake, still trying to use the Seven Nations Treaty to restrain Riften, implying that his death would definitely start a war. But the man doesn't fall for it. Just as Riften is about to end this dog's life, Ruth rushes over to stop him. If he really is a Lebanon noble, dealing with him here might bring unnecessary trouble. Riften is very displeased with Ruth stopping him, believes they must deal with him immediately. To quell his anger, the Knight Order members all agree. Ruth scratches his head, saying this would only create friction with Lebanon. Besides, he suddenly spreads his hands. "Would you soil your noble lady's eyes?" At these words, Riften's eyes tremble. "What did you say?" Turns to see Maisie collapsed beside the soldier, eyes fixed on him unblinkingly. The man grits his teeth, anger surging and expression dark. "Why is my wife in such a place?" Ruth helplessly replies, "When the territory has problems, isn't it natural for the lady to mediate?" Riften grips his sword tightly. "Die here or surrender. Choose one." After hesitating briefly, Robert throws away his weapons, regarding Maisie's actions. Riften is very angry. His words come out particularly rough. "What could you do by running out here?" Maisie instantly deflates, unable to argue. She really couldn't do anything. Riften pulls her onto his horse. After giving clear instructions, he leads people into the city. Seeing how the usually gentle person suddenly becomes so cold, Maisie's words of apology surge up. The newly renovated castle she wanted to show him, she can't speak of it now. Even after entering the bedroom, Riften still doesn't say a word. Maisie wrings her hands together. When she opens her mouth, her voice carries tears. The man turns around, strides over to her, pulls her tightly into his embrace. He was terrified. What if he hadn't arrived in time? Thinking of this, Riften shouts loudly, "You shouldn't have come out from the beginning." Then seriously warns Maisie, no matter what happens, she must not put herself in danger. Seeing her obedient nod, Riften tiredly leans against her. The moment he saw Maisie collapsed on the ground, he felt all his hair stand on end. He greedily inhales her scent. Maisie reaches up to touch his cheek, knows he's not angry, just worried about her, feeling warmth in her heart. Sorry for SC scaring you. Riften pulls her back a little, looks her up and down. Are you hurt anywhere? The man tilts his head. Let me see. The straightforward words make Maisie's cheeks flush red. Riften moves closer, undoes the ties of Maisie's outer clothes. I need to confirm you're completely unharmed. Otherwise, one scratch equals one head. The man gently touches Maisie's chest. Seeing the red mark on her shoulder, he grits his teeth. Just now someone lost their head. The man picks up Maisie, throws her onto the bed. His large hand slides under her skirt, causing Maisie to let out a muffled moan. He stops looking at the wound on her knee, feels a surge of anger. Just for this one wound, they should all be executed. Thinking of what Robert said about war if he's killed, Maisie suddenly sits up. I fell by myself, invading my territory, hurting my wife. Whatever punishment they receive is their own doing. Maisie speaks with restrained tears. If there's war, you'll have to go far away again. You just got home. At these words, Riften freezes. He cups Maisie's face, kisses her deeply and sincerely low. Husky sweet talk mixed with intimate sounds. The man's energy is too abundant, causing Maisie to fall asleep in a daze. When she wakes up hazily, Riften has already returned from interrogating the invaders. Seeing Maisie's bright eyes, the man freely admits his love. Says if not for official business, he wouldn't want to leave the bed. Maisie feels anxious. Did you question them? Her hands unconsciously grip the blanket. Is he really a noble? To verify his true identity, he specially invited a judge from the suburbs. He is indeed a noble. After his half-brother stole his inheritance, he stole the family heirloom and fled here. Riften lifts Maisie's chin. He probably heard about the huge treasure I dug up and got greedy. The man strokes Maisie's ear, watching it gradually turn red. In a good mood, but he's also unlucky. Never dreamed Riften could return from the kingdom to Anatole in 8 days. Thinking of this, the man can't help but get angry, should have beheaded them as a warning to others. Maisie gently places her hand on the man's arm, making him slightly startled. But he has to admit, the battlefield doesn't have such heavenly days as now, with a beautiful wife in his arms. Who'd want to go to war? So he contacted Robert's father to control his people and ask for compensation. Maisie smells the rose scent in Riften's hair and can't help but laugh. The man feels a bit embarrassed. Thought she might like this smell, but worried Maisie would think he's not manly enough. Before this, she thought he would be fierce and scary like his father, never expected now to feel. He is actually quite adorable. Maisie cups Riften's face, pulls him close, plants a kiss on his lips, making the man slightly startled. I really like it. Getting Maisie's rare initiative kiss, Riften can't control himself. Gently kisses her lips. The overwhelming masculine pheromones make Maisie breathless. Pushes her down on the bed. Looks like I'll have to use this scented soap for life. Just as Maisie steps into the dining room, she sees Ruth and Wuslan among others, has a moment of hesitation, then sees Ruth making a bitter face greeting her and asking about her injuries, while also pulling out a chair for her. Maisie had always heard that unless there's something special, knights usually eat in their dormitory dining hall. Didn't expect to run into them like this, creating an awkward atmosphere. She takes the chance to ask about Riften's whereabouts. Ruth looks troubled. He went to deal with the destroyed gates, and after this incident, this person who was already obsessed with defense plans to install a defense module. And the most miserable is Ruth, who's nearly falling apart from exhaustion trying to make that module. But now looking at Maisie, his eyes light up. My lady, you know basic mathematics, right? Keenly sensing Ruth has no good intentions, she pauses briefly, then awkwardly changes the subject. This is cool, quite delicious. Ruth stares blankly. Is this how you repay my kindness? In any case, the self-deprecating Maisie, who claims shallow learning and insufficient ability, is no match for the cunning Ruth. Even Heberin can't stand watching. That's enough. How can you be so rude to the noble lady? However, Ruth selectively becomes deaf, staring at Maisie unblinkingly. Finally, she gives in, agreeing to Ruth's request, breaking the awkward atmosphere. Heberon also joins the conversation. In comparison, Wuslan's attitude remains very cold. As they leave, Maisie's mood becomes a bit low. Ruth sighs. After all, the Red Knight Order was manipulated by Maisie's father, Duke Cloy. Although the dragon-slaying mission turned out well, bringing fame, they nearly suffered heavy losses, and all this was because he forcefully pushed the task to Riften, and as his daughter, she didn't even do the minimum for her husband, who was forced onto a path of no return. Knights following Riften have always been like this, so their unfriendly attitude is understandable. Ruth's words make Maisie's explanation die in her throat, whether she knew about it back then or not. So many years have passed, talking about it now is meaningless, but she still can't help thinking, they must think I pushed Riften into it then ignored him. Lost in thought, Maisie is interrupted by a servant. The Lord is looking for you. Just hearing news of him makes Maisie feel as if the world suddenly brightens. In the noisy garden, a beautiful white pony appears in Maisie's vision. This is a gift carefully selected by the man for her. She can't hide her joy but is still cautious. Can I really accept it? In Riften's view, only Maisie deserves to ride such a beautiful creature. She shyly praises it as the best gift she's ever received, looking radiant in the sunlight, making it hard to look away. He can't help but raise his hand to hold the back of her head, kissing her soft lips. Maisie is like a poppy that makes him addicted. Riften perfectly demonstrates his boyfriend power, displaying a whole carriage of gifts prepared for his little wife. Walking in the renewed castle, Riften very seriously praises, providing excellent emotional value. Making up for Maisie's small disappointment from yesterday, in yesterday's rage, there really wasn't time to think about other issues. The man pats her head in comfort, invites Maisie to unwrap gifts together. A gorgeous dress makes her look even more delicate. Riften believes it's his fault that Maisie couldn't bring her jewels and clothes from Cloy City, so even if he has to squeeze out time, he wants to make it up to her. But one sentence unexpectedly stirs up thorns in Maisie's heart, full of joy yet forcing a smile. Whenever Riften treats her like a noble princess, she feels like a fraud. After the man leaves early because of prisoners, Maisie carefully seals and stores the remaining gifts. Then goes to check on the castle's winter storage supplies. Busy here and there, before she knows it, night falls. Although busy, it's fulfilling, different from the deathly quiet life in Cloy City. But darkness and loneliness often catalyze deep-seated fears. She doesn't understand why Riften is still so good to her after her father repeatedly schemed against him. But even so, she wants to try her hardest to hold on to this happiness.
Morning light spills onto the curtains. Maisie stares unblinkingly at the peacefully sleeping Riften. His handsome face looks somewhat tired, quietly moves away from the man's arm. He rushed back without getting proper rest. Gently plays with the man's hair strands, hearing his soft whimpers. Can't help but laugh. The great dragon-slaying hero doesn't know his image in his lover's heart is actually adorable. To avoid waking him, Maisie quietly leaves, comes to the dining room to enjoy a warm breakfast, but just after one bite, she's interrupted. Ruth, with dark circles under his eyes, speaks full of resentment. How lucky to enjoy breakfast early. I've been starving since last night. To complete the special task the Lord assigned, Maisie protests in a tiny voice, too busy yesterday. Busy unwrapping gifts? To Ruth's accusations, she can't help but talk back, and as for Maisie's temperament, Ruth already has her figured out. Lord Kappas values the safety of territory residents most, my lady.
Helping me finish early would put the Lord at ease too. Sure enough, just mentioning Riften makes Maisie compromise. But when she sees the mess in the library, she still can't help but feel a headache. Ruth gives Maisie the basic operations. She just needs to draw the patterns on the tools more precisely. Looking at the scattered drawings on the table once again refreshes her understanding. Originally thought magic just needed chanting spells. Ruth shrugs. What you're talking about is simple manifestation magic. Advanced magic often needs hours of preparation. Looking at the precise drawings in hand, Maisie feels like she's opened the door to another world, full of curiosity, and Ruth explains to her as much as possible, holding the heavy magic stone in hand, like peeking into another world. With a clap, Ruth puts his hands together now that curiosity is satisfied. Let's get to work. Under his guidance, Maisie quickly gets the hang of it and performs better than Ruth expected. He praises their cooperation as perfect. Suddenly, there's a loud bang. The servant said, "You've been here since early morning." Riften appears in the library with a dark face, dissatisfied with Ruth casually ordering around the Lord's wife. After all, staying by his side is very dangerous, whether explosions or fires. Regarding his evaluation, Ruth feels very speechless, but under Maisie's careful coaxing, Riften compromises. If you want to help, then help. Then help. And warns Ruth, don't even think about dangerous experiments. Then with a wave of his hand, pulls Maisie into his arms. That's enough for today, you figure out the rest yourself. The man plans to take his little wife on a date hand in hand and let Maisie experience her beautiful pony. Aren't you tired? Better go back to rest. Riften chuckles. I'm not an old man, not at the age where I need to lie in bed to rest. The man seizes every chance to tease Maisie, looking at her with eyes full of love. If we must spend time in the bedroom. Understanding the man's unfinished words, Maisie's face turns red. Shyly buries herself in Riften's embrace. Maisie sits stiffly on horseback. Because of staying in Cloy City, she had no chance to ride horses. Riften naturally knows this. Rumors said Duke Cloy's eldest daughter was frail and sensitive, disliking public appearances. And Duke Cloy was one of the few powerful ministers. Naturally, many were interested in his daughter. Moreover, Maisie was completely different from her sister, never appearing in public, making people more curious. Riften mentions he once met a knight who couldn't resist curiosity and secretly went to Cloy City. Maisie grips the reins tightly, self-mockingly says, he must have been very disappointed. After all, he risked seeing such an ordinary woman. She feels she's not even ordinary. Riften suddenly moves closer. How could that be? You're so adorable. His eyes full of passionate sincerity, sensing Maisie's avoiding gaze, the man whispers in her ear, "Otherwise, why would I have such intense reactions in the bedroom? Haven't I already praised your beauty through actions?" Walking on this mountain path is Riften's rare leisure time. Maisie, shivering, catches his attention, slowly approaches, tells her to relax and maintain balance, just like ... like sitting on my lap. At these words, Maisie's cheeks flush red again. "Riften, Yuki, I can't say such things." The man expresses he greatly enjoys every chance to tease her. "Don't know what you're being shy about, in bed you clearly." Maisie loses balance, almost falls from the horse. Riften quickly catches her shoulders. The words he speaks are full of love, galloping on mountain paths, feeling the autumn breeze. Riften suddenly remembers he once went to Cloy City, saw Maisie sitting in the courtyard with a cat on her lap, gently stroking it. The little creature purred contentedly, and this gentle, peaceful scene stayed in Riften's heart for many years. Walking and chatting lets the rarely communicating couple understand each other better. Riften reaches out to break the branch in front of Maisie. Everything about Maisie seems covered by a mysterious veil, and she almost never mentions it voluntarily. So actually, Riften doesn't understand her, and today, with perfect sunlight, environment, and atmosphere, the man simply asks directly, "What do you like? What do you hate? What do you usually think about? Tell me everything." Riften displays his knight spirit, taking the lead in revealing himself. He likes horses and strong liquor, food that can fill the stomach, gold, jewels, honor, and such. He likes most things men like, hates liars and useless people. One sentence makes her face change slightly. When it's Maisie's turn, she tries to gloss over it but is exposed by Riften, has to answer honestly, but when mentioning things she hates, Maisie pauses briefly, purses her lips. "I hate myself," under the man's startled gaze. Maisie rides the horse forward, clearly not wanting to continue this topic. In the vast wilderness, here Maisie can feel she is free. She pants slightly, feeling her heart beating. Riften easily lifts her up. They sit under a tree, listening to the wind, watching falling leaves freely and leisurely. Raises hand to block a breeze for her, takes out his small wine bottle, watching Maisie take small sips. The man's eyes gradually deepen. "Feed me," puts the bottle to the man's lips, watching his Adam's apple move. Riften wipes his mouth, hesitates briefly but still asks, "Why do you hate yourself?" But Maisie asks back, "Haven't you ever hated yourself?" The man pauses, falls silent briefly, countless times, but never hated to the point where when asked what I hate, the first answer is myself. Riften gently kisses Maisie's forehead. "That's because you don't have anything for people to hate." Hearing his wife's praise, Riften's lips curve up. "You're the strongest knight in the world. Tall and smart." Although shy, once praising Riften, she can't stop. Maisie can't help sneaking peeks. The man has sword-like eyebrows and star-like eyes, defined features, eyes full of tenderness, making one sink into them. Maisie's cheeks turn red, and very handsome. However, this point makes Riften doubtful. If so, why did you tremble like seeing an ogre every time I went to Cloy City? As if you'd flee in panic if I took one more step closer. Maisie looks around guiltily. Because you're big and your expression is cold, Riften instantly falls into self-reflection. What about now? Still afraid of me? Maisie shakes her head repeatedly, pulls her into his embrace, and kisses her. Maisie is completely caught off guard, pushes him away with her hands. The man moves closer with a smile. "Don't worry, there's only us two here. Don't be afraid," says this, and kisses Maisie's soft, cool lips again. Feeling the man's caresses, her body can't stop trembling. Intimate sounds drift out in the empty field. Riften gently rests his forehead against hers. "Don't worry, Maisie. Don't be afraid, I'll never let you get hurt again." The man's scent is like winter wind, dry with a cold intensity, filling her completely. As for when Riften hurt her, and why she was afraid of him, she actually can't remember anything. Recently, Riften sticks to Maisie's side whenever he has free time, loving boldly and passionately. Everyone in the castle knows about it. After a period of learning, Maisie's progress surprises Ruth. The work of making defense modules is also in its final stages. This period of study lets Maisie understand magic better. Naturally, she becomes more curious about Ruth's background. He was once a magician from the World Tower, although in legends, even maidens who never left home knew of the World Tower's fame, but in reality, high-ranking magicians there face many restrictions, even spending most of their life in the tower, so Ruth escaped from there. Then met Riften. At that time, he had just become a mercenary, and Riften was already famous then. Listening to Ruth's memories helps Maisie understand him better. At 16, Riften was a fearless youth, fighting ogres alone, breaking dragon bones with bare hands. Even now, thinking back, Ruth can't help but frown. Maisie just listening makes her heart race, mostly with worry, but now Riften is very strong, can easily handle most magical creatures. except for that time slaying the dragon. Hearing this, Maisie trembles and asks the question that's been bothering her. What exactly happened during the dragon slaying? Simply put, Riften used his special ability to briefly absorb the dragon's magic power, turned it into sword energy and split the dragon's head in half. This action was undoubtedly gambling with his life, if calculated wrong by half. Riften would have turned to ashes. Maisie feels terrified. She never knew behind people's praise of the hero's deed was such extreme danger. He really could have died at any moment. But all this hasn't ended. After winter passes, Riften will still go on expedition by royal command. This is his duty as a subject and knight. Maisie only now realizes that the peace and happiness she thought she held in her hands is so fragile. 2 days later, I have to go on a subjugation mission. The man's words completely shatter the already unsettled Maisie. Her hands unconsciously clench, quietly asking where Riften is going. Heard there's a group of goblins beyond the mountain, planning to station there for 4 or 5 days to completely eliminate them. His wife's question, will it be dangerous, makes the man's eyes widen. Suddenly bursting into laughter, Maisie, you're not worried I'll be killed by those goblins, are you? Riften says seriously. Although troublesome, it's not dangerous, just a bit more complicated than hunting rabbits. Maisie hesitantly opens her mouth. If it's not dangerous, then leaving them alone. The man interrupts her words with a serious expression. Protecting this land is my duty. Maisie, are you asking me to neglect my duties? She stands frozen in place. Although goblins have low magic power, their breeding ability is amazing. If not eliminated now, they'll eventually become a huge hidden danger. She helplessly apologizes. Riften reaches out to his wife. I'm not angry at you, Maisie. Come here. Holds his wife tightly in his embrace, thinking she's afraid of another Lebaton Gate attack incident happening, constantly comforting her. The new defense module will be finished tomorrow, so even if he's temporarily away, it will be very safe. He also doesn't want to leave the warm bed to sleep on cold, hard soil. But he has things he must do. Riften holds Maisie and falls into peaceful sleep. But Maisie can't close her eyes for a long time. Loving someone starts with worrying about them. Even knowing Riften is invincible, she still can't help but worry. Maisie, who never experienced being loved since childhood, has always been trying her best to love others. Ruth's testing of the defense module is as grand as ever, only this way can let everyone know, even without Riften, Anatole is absolutely safe. This is not just to test performance, but more to reassure the people. Riften has other things unfinished, leaves Maisie with Ruth and Heberon. The two argue and bicker all the way, making Maisie find it amusing. Midway they turn to Anatole's market. Ruth returns with 2 large bags of herbs fully loaded when preparing to leave. Maisie is attracted by a small stall nearby. What are these colorful rope decorations? Ruth looks back but doesn't see him. These are decorations tied to sword bags. A sudden voice startles Maisie's hair standing on end. Turns to see Heberon seriously explaining to her, said to bring blessings from elves when worn on swords, and Maisie hadn't seen any on Riften's sword, because he wouldn't rely on such superstitions. Following Heberon's suggestion, she picks one to give to Riften. Maisie really envies their unrestrained interactions, and looks forward to the day she is gradually accepted by them. Next comes another sweet private time for the couple. Riften gently helps Maisie braid her hair, showing his improvement in technique. The man has a face seeking praise. Maisie gently plants a kiss on his cheek, making Riften, who already didn't want to go on the mission, even more reluctant. He gazes at his little wife lovingly. Wait for me to return. Maisie hesitantly calls him back, takes out the colorful rope decoration she bought. Heberon said, tying it to the arrow bag will bring Elve's blessing. Maisie's cheeks flush. Although Heberon paid for it, I chose it. Seeing no reaction from Riften, she becomes anxious, secretly wants to withdraw her hand. If you don't like it, don't force yourself. The man suddenly grabs Maisie's slender wrist. Give it to me. Under Maisie's incredulous gaze, Riften's face reddens from ears to cheeks, pulls his little wife into his embrace. I'll come back soon. Wait for me. One sentence brings back all of Maisie's suppressed longing thoughts, tears flowing like springs, and regrets more for not properly preparing a parting gift. This hero beloved and praised by all, so satisfied because of this small decoration. Just after Riften leaves, the outskirts of Tapas City are attacked by monsters, heavy casualties. Maisie follows Ruth to help with treatment. Even though she wasn't loved as a child, she's a noble duke's daughter. She's never seen such cruel and bloody scenes, but still endures the discomfort, following Ruth's instructions step by step to continue bandaging. Assists when Ruth casts healing magic. When his magic light source brightens, Maisie suddenly realizes she always thought healing magic was colder than ice, piercing to the heart. But this light before her is so warm and gentle. Although she tries her best to endure, when she smells the burnt bodies of werewolves, she finally vomits. Even so, her mind is still on quickly preparing the herbs Ruth needs. Knight Karen suddenly appears behind her. Are you all right? When he realizes it's Maisie, he shows surprise. Why would Lady Kappas come to such a place? His eyes glance. Seeing the vomit at Maisie's feet, his expression suddenly changes. Noble lady need not come to such places. Without distinguishing right from wrong, wants to send Maisie back to the city, even warns her not to do these useless things when Karen is about to call someone to send her away. Maisie blocks his path, expression serious. Thinking of Karen's contemptuous expression, she musters courage. As the Lord's wife, it's my responsibility to lead the rescue when the territory has problems. What right does Karen have to accuse me of doing useless things? At these words, his face freezes. Don't mind me. Go do your own things, turns and leaves, leaving Karen stunned in place. Maisie feels anxious, afraid he'll think she's an arrogant stutterer. Thinking again, it doesn't matter, they already hate her anyway, so even if they hate her more, it's no different from before. She keeps comforting herself in her heart. This kind of thing doesn't count for anything, but she can't help feeling a surge of soreness in her heart, because Anatole has been isolated for a long time. Only after Riften took over did it slowly start being accepted again. So currently, there's only Ruth as a magician. He can only rest briefly before continuing to treat the wounded. Maisie becomes his little assistant, adding boards, feeding medicine, hot compress with towels, cleaning wounds. After a day, she feels like she's no longer herself, although tired. But Ruth taught her a lot, learned much knowledge, Mrs. Capus. With a call, Maisie turns her head, sees Karen standing before her. Somewhat awkwardly, hands Maisie a bowl of steaming soup and bows to apologize, making Maisie slightly startled. My lady is right. I was presumptuous. I sincerely apologize to you. Maisie suddenly feels like the gloom before her has been swept away after experiencing this monster attack. The predicament of having only Ruth as a magician in the city worries her, so she decides to learn some knowledge about healing. To prepare for emergencies, however, the greater the hope, the disappointment also increases proportionally. After reading books for several days, Maisie feels she recognizes every word, but put together she can't understand them. Actually, she knows doing these might not have any meaning. Even if she understands some shallow healing techniques, it won't have much effect. But if she does nothing, it will only make her more anxious. The reason is actually very simple. She was never the noble and elegant lady in Riften's perception. She's afraid once he discovers this fact, all the love he now gives her will disappear like a mirage. Such anxiety tightly surrounds Maisie, so if she could be of even a tiny bit of use, even if she's tired of later, she can hope for a chance to stay by his side. At this moment, thoughts of missing Riften reach their peak. Only by his side can she dispel the anxiety in her heart. Ruth's sudden appearance makes Maisie internally panic. Afraid of being mocked for wanting to learn healing techniques beyond her ability, however, Ruth's reaction is unexpected. This is really a good idea. When Ruth discovers Maisie actually knows ancient language, once again refreshes his view of her, and puts forward a bold suggestion. Why don't you learn magic? How did I not think of this earlier? He suddenly becomes excited. If she could use healing magic, it would make things much easier for him. Maisie feels timid. I can't do it. Seeing her hesitation, Ruth systematically analyzes for her. You already have an affinity for magic, no mathematics and ancient language. These are already the basic qualities needed to learn magic. Maisie is tempted by his words, repeatedly confirms with him, try it. There's nothing to lose anyway. Ruth is like a hunter who has set up a trap waiting for the rabbit to enter the cage, gently persuading her. Finally catching her completely. If Ruth is willing to teach me, I'll study hard. One person's path is destined to be lonely and difficult. But as long as there's hope, there's light. She imagines one day becoming a magician like Ruth, summoning wind and rain, defeating bandits, invading Anatole, becoming Riften's pride, unconsciously yearning for this scene. Compared to Ruth's passionate speech, Maisie is full of confusion, completely unable to understand. Facing setbacks everywhere makes her want to give up, but to become a better self in her dreams, she still chooses to continue working hard. Everyone will shine in their own field. When explaining magic to Maisie, Ruth is completely immersed in it. He gives Maisie a magic stone that can cultivate affinity and basic books for learning magic. When hearing the returning horn of the subjugation team, Maisie quickly runs outside lifting her skirt. The man's cold, unapproachable aura, in the instant of seeing his little wife, turns into a face full of tender affection. Maisie suddenly flies into his embrace, making him momentarily stunned. Before Maisie can carefully look at him, he holds his little wife's slender, soft waist and kisses her. Greedily taking in her scent, however, seeing them in an instant, Maisie just bursts out with a sharp cry, then is constrained in a powerful embrace. When Riften approaches his petite wife, he just wants to embrace her tenderly. After being away for many days, His heart yearns for her like a drawn bowstring. His affectionate gaze makes her heart flutter. He only wants to hold his dear wife close. He wipes away Maisie's tears. Feeling heartache at the sight, no matter how intense he becomes, she accepts it silently. In Maisie's mind, a husband has the right to make requests of his wife anytime. Seeing the man's concerned expression, she touches his cheek. Saying she's fine, he smirks and takes her delicate hand, stroking Maisie's smooth back, saying now he'll get serious. A sudden knock interrupts the intimate moment. As servants' voices come through, thinking they might have heard everything, Maisie feels mortified. The man reclines in the bath, showing off his impressive chest and abs, pretending to be pitiful to convince his wife to help him bathe. Easily getting his way with her, Maisie hesitantly approaches, gets pulled into the bath for a passionate French kiss. Feeling her deep affection and devotion, he wants to kiss every inch of her. Maisie lies exhausted on the bed. Now she truly can't move a single finger. The man's kisses on her shoulder startle her. Aren't you tired? Riften looks at her tenderly, playing with strands of Maisie's hair. The mountain is cleared now. I won't leave before winter passes, taking her hand in his. We can take it easy for a while, promising to show her Anatole's unique winter scenery. Feeling Maisie snuggle closer to him, the man chuckles softly. This moment of warmth fills her once shattered world. Yet in night after night, she still wakes up suddenly, panicking about the possibility of being abandoned. Every night spent entangled together results in mornings when she can't get up. After finishing his city patrol, the man mysteriously takes Masi out. Looking at 3 kitten cubs before her, Maisie is momentarily dazed. When Riften suggests bringing them back to their room, she beams with delight. This is her first time keeping cats in her room. She rarely talks about herself, unconsciously becoming downcast. Father disliked animals, so even hunting dogs weren't allowed in Claudia City. And when she was very young, Maisie used to secretly share warmth with dogs in the backyard. That was her only comfort then. Riften looks at her seriously. Maisie, in here, you don't need to hold back on anything you want. I said I'd let you live a life like in Claudia City. No? Even better than back then. But the man's promise stings Maisie's heart like thorns. Things are very good now. Riften looks at her with an unreadable expression, letting out a deep sigh, watching her feed milk to the 3 little ones, feeling strangely content. Seeing Maisie's attention completely drawn to the kittens, the man feels neglected, suddenly calling out to her, Maisie, stop looking at them. He pats his thigh, his voice enticing, come sit here, successfully holding his dear wife, looking satisfied, as if enchanted by her, the sound of burning firewood, the warm, gentle air, the man's strong arms all make Maisie feel at peace. Riften softly asks, is there anything inconvenient or lacking in Anatole? Maisie shakes her head without hesitation. I like it here. The man gently kisses her smooth forehead, saying nothing, but his arms around her keep tightening. Maisie senses his unease. He worries that Claudia's pampered noble lady isn't satisfied with life here. She knows well that if she told him the truth, he wouldn't be so anxious. But she's not sure how he would face her as his wife if he knew the truth. It's good here. The man seems half believing. The city walls are magnificent and strong, making one feel secure. The castle sits on the mountainside, offering a view of all Anatole through the windows. Most importantly, she says, the chef in Kappa's castle is excellent. Maisie's eyes light up at this. The man watches adoringly as Maisie chatters on. She's always happy at mealtimes, to the point she's gained weight, though that's something never to be mentioned. Riften's cool lips brush past her cheek. You really have such a good appetite. His warm palm kneads Maisie's earlobe, making her shiver. She buries her face in the man's broad shoulders. Just as the moment grows passionate, about to do something intimate, they get interrupted at the crucial moment. The knock at the door drives the man crazy. Gable comes to inform Riften that everyone has assembled in the meeting room, and that Luciens wants to help Maisie prepare for tonight's banquet, watching them busy bringing out all the pre-prepared dresses, jewelry, to make Maisie dazzle at the banquet. After trying on all the dresses, the final chosen white dress makes her look elegant and noble. Maisie is so tired she barely recognizes herself in the mirror. Seeing their attentive service to her, their thoroughness moves her deeply. In the cold wind and snow, the banquet hall emits warm, gentle light. The hall is filled with a lively, harmonious atmosphere. As soon as Maisie steps into the banquet hall, Yuri wags his tail like an obedient big dog, eagerly recounting stories of following Riften on expeditions, talking non-stop. After being interrupted, he transforms into a gloomy creature, then eagerly offers to take Maisie's cloak. She suddenly hesitates, worried that dressing too formally might seem excessive. She closes her eyes tightly, taking off her cloak as if making a brave decision. After a moment, she opens her eyes slightly, finding the previously noisy hall has fallen silent. Yuri instantly transforms into an effusive flatterer. My goodness, madam, you're too beautiful. You were charming enough before, but today you're simply radiant. His undisguised amazement makes Maisie blush with embarrassment. A tall man suddenly appears behind Macy with a wine glass. Herbert teases, "Long time no see, madam." After greeting, Herbert naturally sits beside Macy, watching Yuri diligently bringing her food. She chews with big bites, her eyes showing satisfaction with the food. Herbert finds it amusing and pours her some wine. Macy doesn't refuse, gulping it down in one go, making the man laugh, instantly opening her energy channels. He keeps pouring her glass after glass. Everyone is drawn to their table, amidst their calls of commander's wife. Macy completely lets loose. Shortly after, her cheeks flush red and her body sways. Still muttering one more glass, drunk Macy becomes fierce, a complete contrast to her usual self. After hearing Herbert say drinking can help her grow taller, she accepts every drink offered. Just as she's getting tipsy, someone suddenly grabs her mouth. The man's face is dark. "What are you doing?" Seeing his wife giggling about wanting to grow taller, Riften glares at everyone. "Who's going to explain this to me?" Herbert smiles apologetically. "Well, we just saw she had good tolerance." The man slams the wine glass on the table. "So you're using my wife for your entertainment?" Before he can say more, seeing Macy about to fall asleep, the man picks her up in one swift motion. A mischievous smile flashes across his face. "Knights, hear my order: eat and drink well today. Tomorrow you'll need your strength at the training ground." Leaving behind a room full of groans as he leaves. On the way back to their room, the man is still grinding his teeth in anger. Macy suddenly plants a kiss on his neck, looking at him with a giggling smile. The next moment she falls asleep, leaving the frustrated lord standing in the wind. Macy opens her eyes groggily, feeling like her head might explode, suddenly hearing a teasing voice. Finally awake, little drunkard, she sees the man's broad shoulders and narrow waist backlit. He takes her wrist. "Macy, I'll only say this once. If I ever see you drinking yourself silly among men again, I'll make sure you can't leave the bed for days." Seeing his little wife's confused state, though he wants to possess her right now, there's still something important she needs to do. Ruth greets her with a smile. "Hello, Lady Cupis. Grown any taller after last night?" One sentence makes Macy's face turn bright red. She's furious, but learning takes priority. Time flies to dusk, with significant progress. Ruth has a unique persistence in teasing Maisie. After the lesson ends, he suggests Macy dine in the dining hall to break down barriers with the knights. After all, everyone is very interested in last night's events. When Riften enters, the two are at a standstill. The man's face darkens, his voice full of jealousy. "What are you doing here so late?" He puts his arm around Maisie's shoulders. "Let's go. I had dinner sent to our room." Ruth asks with slight confusion. "Not going to the dining hall?" The man smiles coldly. "They're all exhausted in the barracks, so I had food sent over." Ruth shivers at this. "What did you do?" The man looks cunning. "I just let them train since they had so much energy to spare." Seeing Riften's silent demeanor, Macy thinks he's still angry about last night, softly apologizing, but the man suddenly grips her hand tightly. "Are you always with that fellow when you come to the library?" Macy takes a moment to understand. Ruth is usually there. We often meet. Hearing Macy say Ruth has taught her many things and helped her when she first came to the castle, the man looks displeased, hesitating before speaking. "Macy, do you prefer intelligent men?" At these words, Macy freezes, her face instantly turns red, stammering, "Riften, it's not what you think." Her fingers tightly grip her skirt. Though embarrassed, she speaks out, "I still prefer men like Riften, reliable and steady, good at riding horses. And gentle to me." He feels awkward about his unreasonable jealousy, suddenly lifting her up, his large hand caressing her skin, kissing her soft lips. The kiss has never been so fierce. A sudden noise makes them separate. Seeing the blushing maids, Macy is too embarrassed to lift her head. Given that she spends most time either with maids or Ruth, while he, as her husband, spends the least time with her, the situation seems unreasonable. The man holds her hand, kissing it reverently. "Macy, I mean, at least when I'm with you, don't care about others." His gaze is sincere and passionate, making Macy's heart race. She feels like her heart can't stop beating. All matters unrelated to him naturally leave her mind. When she crawls up with messy hair, Riften is already fully dressed, giving her a light kiss on the lips. As deep winter arrives, with him spending more time in the castle, Macy learns more about him. His preferences are simple, evident from his singular style of dress. But his simplicity doesn't extend to Macy. He wants Macy to wear elaborate gowns and precious jewels, to live luxuriously under the maid's careful attention, as if these things hold special meaning for him, as if both contempt and longing for nobility exist in his heart. But thinking about her clumsy imitation and the gap between her and real noble ladies makes her panic rise. Ruth interrupts her wandering thoughts. "Focus. My lady, Lutyens brings tea for both." Since learning of Riften's concern about Ruth, she always brings Lutyens when visiting the library. But these two seem to have an incompatible relationship. Ruth mentions magic sensitivity training. She feels discouraged, making no progress. Though surprised, he comforts her not to rush. It's then that Maisie learns that usually those with such strong magic sensitivity like hers are cultivated from childhood with repeated exposure to magic. In a flash of insight, Maisie realizes, could it be because of the repeated punishment and magical healing constantly from her childhood? She grips her teacup tightly. After a moment, she consoles herself that the origin doesn't matter. What's important is how to use it. After some time studying, Maisie is very familiar with magical structures. The door bursts open. It's Riften. He strides in, so you are here. He sniffs her hair lightly, his eyes dark. Have you been cooped up here since early morning? Learning Maisie spent all day in the library. They have a small argument. To Ruth, it all looks like showing off their affection. Riften boldly kisses his little wife's face. Don't watch if you can't stand it. Then tries to take her back. Maisie feels embarrassed about returning to bed in broad daylight, making excuses about unfinished reading. Seeing her persistence, the man about to compromise notices the delicate patterns on the book. His expression changes, looking darkly at the materials spread on the table. Are you learning magic? His low voice sounds. Ruth is somewhat surprised. You didn't know. Your wife started learning magic with me several weeks ago. I discovered Madame has talent in this area, and am teaching her bit by bit. The man slams the book on the table, expression grim. Who authorized this? Not expecting him to be so angry, Maisie is momentarily stunned. Why didn't you tell me? Not expecting him to be so angry, Maisie didn't react for a moment. Ruth, thinking Riften is worried about Maisie's safety, prepares to explain in detail. I won't teach her complex magic, just simple defense and healing spells. If Madame learns these, it will greatly benefit Anatole. The man angrily interrupts. I don't need her help. Riften's look makes her body tremble. Maisie, I didn't bring you back for any help. I only want you to live comfortably and richly. Magic is difficult and draining. Maisie insists for the first time. I won't do anything dangerous. She looks at him seriously. I just want to help. The man grits his teeth. I said I don't need it. Seeing her pale face, he suddenly realizes his hasty words were too harsh, wanting to explain, but when he touches her shoulder, Maisie flinches. Her eyes darting fearfully like a frightened deer, leaving him devastated. He falls silent for a moment, turns to leave. Do what you want. After the argument, Riften doesn't return to their room until very late. That old panic sweeps over her again, tossing and turning, unable to understand what went wrong. He's the one who said he hates worthless losers. The sudden sound of the door opening makes her jump, crystal tears hanging at her eyes. The man stands by the bed, head down, silent, suddenly reaches out to wipe away her tears. Maisie quickly sits up and grabs his hand, staring at him, tears suspended in her eyes, making the man freeze. Maisie, she apologizes in a trembling voice. I'm sorry I was wrong. Seeing her curled up, Riften stands stunned, his lips quivering, suddenly pulls Maisie into his embrace. Her understanding makes him both heartbroken and regretful, his large hand constantly stroking her head. Learn magic if you want, learn whatever you want. Just don't be afraid. Maisie explains she's not afraid of him. Thinking of how she trembles at his approach, the man is deeply remorseful. Damn, you were finally starting to smile at me. Now we're back to the beginning. Maisie lowers her head, silent for a moment, large tears falling. It's not fear, it's that you said you don't need me. I want to help. Riften frantically tries to help her up. It's not like that, Maisie, but she's too afraid of not being needed. I just want to do something. The man holds her shoulders, losing control of his emotions. You don't have to do anything. Seeing Maisie's helpless expression, he freezes, suddenly closes his eyes, circles her waist with one hand and kisses her. You can do whatever you want. As long as you're happy, the one who can leave at any time is you. And the one afraid you'll turn around and never come back is me. Maisie gently nuzzles his palm, still cold. You were outside for a long time. The man helps her sit. I just needed to clear my head. Because you're angry with me? No, before finishing, Maisie's finger suddenly traces his abdomen, making him shiver. He grips her thin shoulders. Do you know what you're doing? Maisie doesn't answer, directly kissing his lips. His dark eyes shine with a mesmerized look. Step by step, guiding her in lovemaking. Like a raging fire burning in his heart, creating a tingling sensation, thinking of how this powerful man who can slay dragons becomes passionate because of her, losing control under her fingers, whatever noble lady's dignity that requires being like the dead, she doesn't want any of it. She just wants to keep this man by her side forever. His breathing is heavy, eyes dark and unclear. Maisie, you're really driving me crazy. She kisses his lips again. I want to make you never able to leave me. Although Riften hasn't figured out why Maisie suddenly wanted to learn magic, but at least it could protect her, even though he would never let Maisie be in danger. But anything could happen. Her fingers keep tightening, but she's not learning magic to protect herself. But so far, all she's shown others is fainting from fear, trembling in terror. Even if she wants Riften to believe, how much can he trust? The current result is already good. The man kisses her forehead, still worriedly telling her, if Ruth makes her do any strange experiments, she must tell him immediately. He won't. He's been teaching me very seriously. At these words, the man's face darkens. After that, Riften never mentions magic again and stops suddenly appearing at the library, but the man's behavior makes Macy uneasy, always feeling like this is all just his way of avoiding the fact that she's learning magic. Because Macy shows no progress in sensing magic, Ruth suggests she train outside where there are more natural elements. The effect might be better than indoors. As there's no training today, although Lucian strongly insists on accompanying her, Macy still refuses. She looks around, wanting to find a place with no people. Spotting a corner of the wall, however, after several attempts, she crouches in the corner, feeling disappointed, following Ruth's method exactly, but still no changes. Because she wants to quickly show results and gain Riften's approval, she's becoming impatient, but the calm magic stone in her hand once again crushes her barely built confidence. The hand holding the magic stone raises high. A moment later, Macy realizes she actually wanted to vent her frustration by throwing things. Truly useless. She suddenly feels that maybe Ruth was wrong. She has no talent at all, but she doesn't want to give up. She wants to go back and see if Ruth has other methods, Macy. She turns at the call, seeing Riften standing behind her. The man's eyes hold more confusion than usual. What are you doing here alone? Learning she came out alone, Riften's expression becomes serious. Macy, even the castle isn't absolutely safe. How can you, as the Lord's wife, come alone to such a deserted place? Knowing the severity, Macy apologizes first. The man fixes her hair at her temples, his voice carrying barely noticeable tenderness. Don't make me worry too much. Getting her obedient response, Riften lightly kisses her cheek. As the weather is nice, he plans to take her for a walk by the lake, seeing her hair blown messy, her eyes sparkling. Riften smiles indulgently. Mountains surround them, with sunlight dancing on the lake's surface. Macy can't help but stare in amazement, listening to Riften describe the northern winters. When lakes freeze so solid people can walk on them, this is a world Macy has never experienced. In her memory, ice was just the thin layer that formed on water buckets in cold winters. For Macy, Claudia City and Anatole are her entire world, completely different from Riften's colorful world. The man tells her about all the places he's visited over the years. After returning home and receiving his knighthood, he spent most of his time between Anatole and Dristan. She remembers Ruth saying, back then, Riften endured many hardships resolving conflicts between Claudia Duchy and the south. Macy suddenly says, no wonder you used to come to Claudia City often, so it was to mediate conflicts. At these words, the man falls silent momentarily, turning his head unnaturally. Did I go that often? Macy points out, every 2 months at most, sometimes at least once a month. Riften mutters quietly, so seeing him suddenly fall silent, Macy is puzzled. Why are you quiet? Did I say something wrong? This makes Macy feel increasingly unable to fathom his thoughts, wanting to enter the man's heart. To peek at all his thoughts, crystal snowflakes fall on her hand. Seeing her surprised, frozen expression, Riften learns it's her first time seeing such heavy snowfall. She opens her hand, watching snowflakes slowly land on her palm, unable to resist wanting to know how it feels to ride horses in the snow. This is scenery she's never seen, experiences she's never had. Her hand suddenly grips the reins tightly, galloping past Riften's shocked gaze. Macy? That's dangerous. Before he can finish, the beautiful scene before him leaves him staring. Heavy snow falls like goose feathers. The world before him seems dressed in silver, yet only this person laughing freely makes him unable to look away. Making Riften recall the scene from years ago when he watched her from afar, still unforgettable to this day. The winter sun struggles to pierce through the cold air, spreading warmth to the earth, yet still unable to hide the deep desolation winter brings to people. Macy catches a glimpse of the man's expression, momentarily startled. Why would she see fragility in the world's most valiant man? Outside, coldness lingers. Macy sits by the fireplace playing with kittens. Warmth spreads through the room. Ruth, looking exhausted, requests to see her. He's thought of a good training method. He takes Macy outside, planning to channel magic into her body. Let magic power circulate within her. Simply put, it's like cheating. When Ruth begins transferring magic power, she feels warm and slightly ticklish, like a long line wrapping around her arm. Winding into her body, legend says God created light first. He asks Macy to remember this feeling. Then practice on her own, must go through countless failures and retry. Only master it before formally learning healing magic. Macy wakes to repeated calls, hazily seeing the worried man before her. Riften heard she hadn't eaten dinner and slept until now, very concerned. Maisie feels guilty, just reading too long and getting tired. The man grits his teeth, cupping her face. I said you can do whatever you want, but not at the expense of your health. He forcefully pinches Maisie's face. Foreheads touching. Next time, I'll take back my permission for you to learn magic. Seeing his little wife's obedient response, he kisses her forehead before leaving, invites her to dinner together, since formally starting to learn magic. Watching the light becoming increasingly clear through repeated practice makes her unable to look away. Indeed, it's been long since she dined with Riften. Thinking of the man's protest, Maisie decides to adjust today's schedule. Unexpectedly, Ruth informs her. Today she needs to practice, making her very nervous, but learning magic requires finding experience through practical operation. The self-loving Ruth certainly wouldn't self-harm to let her practice when he brings Maisie to the training ground, looking satisfied with a great harvest, although Maisie doesn't say it. He seems to see through her thoughts. Don't worry, Lord Capus isn't at the training ground today. Then looking around for guinea pigs, Herbart lazily sits on a box, teasing, Didn't you say unless someone's disabled? Don't call you over. Ruth turns Maisie around to show off. Of course I wouldn't take on such work. The treatment will be handled by Lady Capus. When Ruth announces Maisie is learning magic, Herbart's expression freezes. Striding towards her, Madam knows magic learning. She just started practicing and isn't very skilled. He scratches his head hesitantly. Training intensity is high lately. It would be trouble if there are side effects. Even with Ruth's promise that healing magic has no side effects, even if it fails, he still worries. Ruth can't stand it anymore. Starting his chatter mode, you know how important healers are. I'm sacrificing my sleep time to teach Madam magic. It's for all of you in the Red Knights. Herbart suddenly points at Yusrin. Because his face was cut in the previous match, let him be the guinea pig. Maisie sees him and can't help feeling nervous. After all, since arriving here, this knight has never shown her a good face. Sure enough, the next second she hears his impatient refusal, even mocking. Rather than let my face be treated by a second-rate magician, I'd rather keep the scar. Maisie clasps her hands together, sincerely asking Yusrin to give her a chance. Unexpectedly, he looks at her darkly. Do you know any incantations? One sentence leaves Maisie breathless, her hands tightly gripping her skirt. Just as she musters courage to speak, Riften sweeps past her like a gust of wind, grabbing Yusrin's collar, lifting him up. He grimaces in pain. The man's eyes blaze with fury. You dare speak to my wife this way? Violently throws him to the ground. Riften is also held back by those around. He sits on the ground, coughing incessantly. Maisie, let's go. Just turning to leave, hearing Yusrin shout, Commander, don't you have any self-respect? Because the hardships during dragon slaying were all due to the Duke of Claudia. He can't bear Riften protecting his daughter so much, even refusing marriage with Princess Agnes for her. Yusrin gets punched, his head turning sideways. Riften is furious at his insolence. The scene becomes chaotic, yet he's still shouting at this moment. What? Want to fight? Riften loses control of his emotions, but stops upon hearing Maisie's voice. The hand gripping his collar trembles, violently pushes him away, warning, Don't let me see you disrespect my wife again, otherwise I'll certainly split you in two with one sword. After the dispute with Yusrin, Riften remains silent, making Maisie, who closely follows, uneasy, seeing the small body beside him shrinking. Eyes filled with hot tears, he grits his teeth, suppressing his anger, yet hears her soft apology. The man's gaze, mixing pain with guilt, looks straight at her, suddenly bending to wipe her tears. Sorry for letting you hear such words, he seriously promises Maisie. This won't happen again. His hands cup her face, voice gentle, making Maisie's already unstable heart completely collapse. Grievances flooding in, but Yusrin would say such things only because she is that stuttering, stupid, and worthless Maisie. She buries her head in the man's chest, shoulders trembling with sobs. If she were a noble lady worthy of Riften, such things wouldn't happen. Even back in their room, Maisie still softly sobs. The man's concerned expression makes her belatedly feel somewhat embarrassed, especially since her crying, tear-stained face was seen by servants earlier, making her more uncomfortable. Urging him to work, the man holds her hand. Large hand gently stroking her long hair. I will certainly warn Yusrin, seeing his loving gaze, then gently kissing her palm. Maisie, you are what I care about most in this world. The knocking from outside forces him to temporarily abandon comforting Maisie. Watching him leave, Maisie knows. If a noble lady encountered such a situation, she would rightfully demand an apology, but she's different. She both fears Riften finding out and tries hard to hide, but he will discover it someday, even if he never does. A woman despised by his subordinates would surely make him feel ashamed. Maisie rushes out of the room. She wants to do something to change the situation, not just stay here doubting herself. She suddenly pushes open the library door, facing Ruth. Caught unprepared, he's startled. Seeing Macy panting, he waves his hand. "Please sit. Did something happen?" He explains that when Macy left earlier, he wanted to follow. However, Riften's threatening look made him abandon the idea. Macy wrings her hands together. Is Yusrin's injury serious? Ruth sighs deeply. "I think Lord Cuppus already showed restraint." He scratches his head embarrassedly, apologizing to Macy about earlier. Originally thought the knight's attitude toward her had improved, so brought her over without any preparation, although Ruth says Yusrin must be regretting now. But judging from his expression then, he probably won't have such feelings of regret. Ruth speaks seriously. "You might find it hard to believe, but though he's harsh, he's a loyal knight, and he used to worship Riften more blindly than anyone, until he refused marriage with Princess Agnes." Yusrin started opposing everything, though hesitant. Ruth continues. Yusrin comes from a noble family, the most loyal to the royal family among the Red Knights. His oath to the princess at the knighting ceremony was widely circulated. Macy is confused. So he hopes the princess and Riften would marry. In fact, everyone in the Red Knights thought the same, because they not only work well together but also look good together. So when Riften refused the marriage, everyone found it hard to understand. Ruth tells her this hoping she might persuade Riften. After all, prolonged tension in the Knights isn't good, although Ruth keeps emphasizing that except for Yusrin, other Knights don't harbor such hostility. But it is indeed because of her. Riften has to bear discord with the royal family. Knights become dissatisfied with the situation. Yusrin's hatred for her won't just disappear. If every time someone insults her, Riften uses his fists to silence them, it won't really solve the problem. Suddenly, she looks determinedly at Ruth. "Can your magic cure me?" Seeing him freeze, thinking her request might be too fanciful, although many people research magic for deafness, blindness, lameness, and such. But so far there's no magic that can cure permanently. Getting the answer, Macy nods disappointedly, feeling somewhat embarrassed, hurriedly explaining before trying to leave. Ruth waves her back there. He falls silent for a moment, hesitantly speaking. "Haven't you thought about correcting your stutter yourself? Pronunciation and language habits can be corrected through training." Macy stands up emotionally. She had practiced countless times in lonely corners, yet still had no effect. Macy, who always buried these things in her heart, eyes filled with hot tears, feeling he makes it sound so easy. As if denying all her previous efforts, Ruth falls into thought, shrugs. "Haven't you noticed you speak more smoothly lately except when too nervous?" Macy's mind goes blank. She suddenly realizes, since coming to Anatole, whether with the servants attending her, or the knights in the cavalry, or in interactions with Riften, without her awareness, her stuttering has been gradually improving, until now when Ruth points it out. She finally notices Ruth gives her several requirements: try to stay calm when speaking, can go slower, he will also look for other correction methods. Macy silently remembers in her heart. With hope, the world in her eyes seems brighter, the trembling boy before her. Is Ruth's new magic practice subject for Macy? Still earnestly promising everyone welcomes her, Macy looks sharply, full of doubt. She carefully unwraps the bandage on his hand. Gently holds his hand, concentrating, easing her own tension. A warm light fills the space between them, flowing out. In an instant, the boy's hand injury is healed. Everyone lets out exclamations. Macy also looks at her hands in disbelief, not expecting to succeed on the first try. Her confidence suddenly soars. Who else has injuries? "I can do more." Herbart and Karen walk in, apologizing to her for the previous incident. Herbart raises his small cut for Macy to heal. Looking at the wound about to heal, she freezes, sensing their intention. Macy feels touched. This feeling of being able to help makes her feel secure. Time passes quickly. With Anatole's first winter rain, Macy looks haggard, suddenly finding she has too many tasks to complete, glancing at the poetry on the table. It's what Ruth prepared for her correction practice. When Riften enters, he hears her muttering something. Macy is startled when she sees him, hurriedly hiding her practice materials. The man looks at the messy documents on the table, falling into thought. "Is your workload too heavy?" He sighs, pulls Macy's petite body into his embrace, kisses her forehead, immediately picks her up, gently places her on the bed. "None of the women I know are as delicate as you. Just looking at you makes me worry you'll be blown away by the wind." An unintentional comment stings her heart. "Who are these women?" She burrows under the covers. "You're exaggerating." The man holds her hand, kissing it twice, then caresses her face. "But Macy, you've really lost a lot of weight." Seeing her still trying to explain, swiftly tucks her into the covers, thoughtfully pulls up the blanket, pats it, and covers her eyes. "Sleep. Macy, you need rest." Yuri greets Macy cheerfully with half his face bloodied. A winter rain made the training ground extremely slippery, causing him to fall from his horse during riding lessons. Seeing the three still casually discussing, Macy worries, forcefully pulls his arm aside, then ends up being taken along to lunch with them. Karen says Riften is discussing raid plans and countermeasures for northern monster migration. Macy also learns about the Red Knight's initiation ceremony. Getting a dragon's magic stone before the knighting ceremony is required to be recognized as one of them. Macy can't imagine letting two 17-year-old boys catch such terrifying creatures. Her shown concern makes Yuri and the others excited. Taking the test is necessary to become a full-fledged knight. Riften just sits down beside Macy. The knights on both sides move away on their own. Macy can't help sneaking glances. Seeing the man's naturally relaxed demeanor, she stands up. "I'm a bit tired. Please excuse me." She looks at the noisy atmosphere in the dining hall, eyes lowered, hoping one day she can blend in too. After the long winter rain, Anatole also welcomes the water season. Macy begins preparing to decorate the courtyard. Visitors are gradually increasing. Before that, the desolate courtyard needs to be adorned. After all, this is the castle's face. While pondering, Macy is called to Riften's office. This is her first time stepping in here. Looking around curiously, the man mainly calls her to inform her. In the next few weeks, 20 to 30 guests from the palace will visit, needing Macy to arrange rooms and hold a simple welcome ceremony. She hesitates before asking, "What kind of guests?" Riften looks up at her, probably an inspection team from King Reuben, Royal Direct Line Knights, and hearing the pause in his words, Macy looks up puzzled. Riften purses his lips, and Princess Agnes, this name falls directly, catching Macy off guard. Although Riften says she's probably just coming for inspection since Agnes has some connection with him, Macy still feels dizzy. Her hands unconsciously tighten, accepting the task. Is there anything else to prepare? Riften stares at her for a while. "Just tell the maids to serve well. You don't need to manage anything else." Macy forces a pale smile. She can't understand why they would send a princess who once discussed marriage with Riften to inspect such a distant territory. But now, the most important thing is calculating that including the inspection team's arrival time, the time for renovating the castle is far from enough. Must start work immediately. When Ruth appears hugging materials, Macy is already exhausted. He's also heard about Reuben King sending people for inspection, knowing Macy might not have time for magic study recently, but defense magic and correction practice are already showing initial results. To prevent her from slacking, he specially prepared more materials. He proudly tells Macy to recite morning and night every day without fail. This will help her speak more fluently. At these words, Macy freezes. After everyone's days of effort, Kappa's castle's appearance is renewed. Finally welcoming the inspection team, a blonde, blue-eyed woman stands at the front. "Pleased to meet you. I am Agnes Georgina Reuben." Macy also introduces herself gracefully. "Hope you have a comfortable and pleasant stay in Anatole." As the season of rest departs, welcoming the flourishing spring, Macy finally meets the legendary Princess Agnes.